Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Springfield at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, where the exhibit called Illinois Answers the Call, Boys in Blue, has just opened to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War, one of the seminal historical activities in our history. And Mary Michaels, you being the curator of this must have had one heck of a time deciding what to put in and what not to put in this exhibit.
Yes, I started thinking about this about 10 years ago, that something should be done to commemorate the sesquicentennial, but wasn't quite sure what. And at that time we were in the old state capitol, so we didn't have the facilities for a big exhibit. Mm-hmm. But then when we came here, things changed, of course. Yeah. And so in January of this year, we finally thought, okay, we can do this. And started going through photographs. Just started with the photographs first. Had a committee of 6 of us, one from each of our library sections, manuscripts and reference and newspapers, and we just started pouring through things. And I started with the photographs first. I wanted to just commemorate the ordinary soldier. We hear a lot about the generals, everyone knows, and it was kind of a twofold purpose. One was to commemorate what they'd done and their accomplishments, and the other was to let people know, like your audience, that they might have an image here or a letter here from one of their ancestors, and that we are thrilled to be in the Lincoln Presidential Library, but we have all of Illinois' history here, and so this is a way of highlighting what we have that isn't Lincoln. Yeah.
Let's move this way just a little bit, and you can see one of the first things you see when I'll let you go by here. Okay. One of the first things you see when you come in, of course, is this cannon, and this is a real cannon from the Civil War.
Yes, and it's from our historic sites. It's stored over at the old state capitol normally, and we had it brought here. And these, this is the type of cannonball.
You might be wondering what it shoots, and you've also right next to the exhibit here, you've got it set up so you can see not only what that shoots, but what other armaments were shot at the same time. And the large one, of course, is the cannonball from that particular cannon.
Yes, and the other were grape shot that were used in guns. And this is a mini ball that...
this one in the front here?
Yes, that had been in, or had shot someone. And
you had an interesting bit of information when you learned about what a mini ball was.
Yes, we were trying
they weren't using the term mini back then.
No, we were trying to correct the text, and because it was spelled M-I-N-I-E, and we kept correcting that as being incorrect. And then one of the reactivated persons says, "No, that's actually correct. It was named for Captain Minnie." And
okay.
So yes.
And actually, that was actually dug out of a human being, wasn't
dug
it?
Out of
so
a
that
human
one
being,
had found its target. Can you imagine having one of those in you? Oof, man.
No.
And also this uniform, this is a replica.
It's a replica.
But it's a very good replica, isn't it?
Yes.
And you have original uniforms, which are just too fragile to put on.
We do. To get it to fit on the mannequin, we really had to stretch. And so one of our patrons, Kathleen Hayworth, who is from Springfield, got that for us. And the red stripe down the side designates him as a cannoneer.
Now, as you said, the focus of this exhibit is on the run-of-the-mill, the rank-and-file soldier, not the generals and the leaders. So what we're going to ask you to do is take us through and show us what you learned and what the public can learn about the rank-and-file soldier, the enlisted man, the guy who just joined up. Okay?
And the guys that joined up were as young as 10.
10? Wow.
And is well into their 50s. So.
Okay, Mary, now that's Tommy Murphy, born in Ireland. He was a member of the 31st Illinois Infantry. He was 17 when he enlisted. At least he said he was 17 when he enlisted.
And probably
that was
younger.
One of the older boys, wasn't it?
Yes. And some were as young as 10.
Oh my goodness, 10.
Most of them lied about their age to get in.
Yeah. Let's go straight down. Look at this fella here. He's Luke Dickerman. He was born in Massachusetts, but he was in the 33rd Illinois Infantry. He said he was 16. He doesn't look 16 to me.
No, it's 12.
And then look at this young man over here. Of course, he was a man by the time he left. This is Theo Ewart, 16th Illinois Cavalry. He said he was 17 years and 4 months old, but he didn't look a day over 15 to me, does he, to you?
No, not at all.
Amazing. So they really weren't too careful about checking. They needed meat, and they took anybody that came in, didn't they?
Exactly.
Wow. This is interesting because this is the youngest. One of these, is it this one that's the youngest? Which
This
one?
is the youngest.
This
yes.
one here is the youngest that we know of the Illinois recruits. His name is Lyston Howe, 15th Illinois Infantry. The youngest soldier in the Army, aged 10 years, 9 months, and 9 days. He stood 4 feet 2 inches tall from Waukegan, Illinois. That just doesn't seem right, does it?
No, it doesn't. He and his brother both enlisted. Orion, which is this one, during one of the battles at Vicksburg, they were running out of supplies, and he goes to General Sherman. He's been injured, and tells him that they need more equipment, and Sherman is more concerned about him and saying, we need to get you help. You know, you need treatment. You need medical treatment, and he refused medical treatment. Ran and turned back to Sherman and said, we need caliber 54. And so then the poem was written about him later, and way after the war, he received the Medal of Honor for his, Medal of Honor for his valor at Vicksburg.
This man here?
Yes.
And this is the poem you were talking about?
Yes.
I'll be darned. And these two were later reunited, weren't they? Were they not? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is interesting because this is a piece of sheet music, and it actually tells a story in music and poetry about being drafted when you were just a kid. I think that's what it says. I'm going to read that while we look at this piece of it. It's grafted into the Army, written by Henry Clay Work. I told them the child was too young, alas, at the captain's 4 quarters. They said he would pass. I thought they would spare a lone widow's heir, but they grafted him into the Army. And those are the lyrics. Oh, man. Okay, now I want to just take a look at Mr. Seidner here, young man Seidner, James A. Seidner. He's from Sangamon County, 4th Illinois Cavalry.
And I think he was 13 when he
We're
enlisted.
looking at this fella right here. You think he was 13? He looks 13. He looks very comfortable with that gun, though, doesn't he?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, this is interesting.
And this one came from Ohio and enlisted, so he probably ran away from home or just left home. And this little one here in the middle, he claimed he was 18. He doesn't look much over 12.
No.
So.
No, he enlisted as Henry Carroll. Misspelled his name. I don't know why he changed the spelling of his name, but oh. Now these boys, they got hurt, shot,
Yes.
killed, just like the older veterans.
Yes.
Look at this. Let's take a look at this newsprint here. This was the Illinois 52nd newspaper. Some of the regiments actually posted a newspaper, didn't they? And what's the story behind this? Because this comes from Missouri.
Yes. The drummer boy was wounded. His feet were shot off, and he was laying next to a rebel soldier. The rebel soldier wrapped his feet, trying to save him, and he knew that if he kept playing his drum, his troops would come to rescue him, which they did, but they were taken prisoner. And as they were marching on to prison, the rebel soldiers still kept trying to help this young boy, but couldn't, and he died. But just really sad. He kept playing the drum and knowing, and it just kept getting weaker and weaker.
And even though the Rebs tried to save him, he was goner anyway. Oh.
And I think it was just because he was a child. And you can't let a child suffer.
Mary George Yost was 14. He's from Carrico, Illinois, when he signed on as a ship's boy. He was on a gunship, I guess, in 1862. And lucky for you and all of us, he kept this journal. And he really, really kept good notes, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And he tell me a little bit, encapsulize the story for us. It's in this journal.
They were being bombarded by a rebel ship, a rebel boat, and they were afraid they were all going to be taken prisoner, or be killed rather. And someone on the rebel boat realized that there was a captain on board, and officers were good hostages. So they decided instead to take them prisoner and which is what saved their lives. So even though they were taken prisoner for a while, their lives were spared. And and that's different now, because now they seem to think taking the officers out was, but
yeah, they could barter the officer.
yes.
Well, Mary, so often more than one family member would enlist, get involved in the war, and then it could possibly, tear apart the whole family. And that's sort of what happened here, wasn't it?
Yes. This is James and John Davis from the 33rd Illinois. They were from Augusta, Illinois. And they were both killed at Vicksburg. One died, James died instantly, John died 2 weeks later from his wounds. And the sheet music, a lot of times these sons were the only support that the family had. And so they lost both emotionally and financially.
There was a lot of composing going on at that time, and just to give the audience a sense for this, the chorus for "Who Will Care for Mother Now" reads like this: "Soon with angels I'll be marching, with bright laurels on my brow. I have for my country fallen. Who will care for mother now?"
It's heartbreaking.
Oh, man. And speaking of heartbreaking, these two brothers, they're both from Illinois as well,
Yes,
from Ottawa, Illinois. These were the Brush brothers. And these letters and photographs that you have here are just heart-rending.
Charles served in the 53rd Illinois, and William in the 104th. And they left at the depot, and then went their separate ways. William was stationed at Camp Douglas and Charles in Memphis. And Camp Douglas is in Chicago. And he writes to Charles and tells him how great his health is and how wonderful he feels. It's the best he's ever felt in a long time. And less than 2 weeks later, Charles gets a letter saying that William has typhoid and has died. And he's unable to attend the funeral. He can't leave. He's on the battlefield suffering this loss by himself. And his parents are sending him letters telling him about bringing him back for burial, and about the funeral, and how they wish they could give their lives to have their son back. And he then writes to his parents and says, "Little did I think when I bid him goodbye that it was for the last time on earth."
And these are original letters, right?
Original letters,
from family
yes.
member to family member. Well, as we kind of scan the walls here in the exhibit, Jane Ehrenhart, you were, I guess you're described by Mary as the main assistant on this exhibit.
Correct.
You spent a lot of time putting all this together, didn't you?
We sure did.
Yeah. And how would you say, what percentage of stuff in your collection came out here to this exhibit? 1%, 2%?
Probably about 2%
About
of my
2%?
collection, because I'm in
Wow.
charge of the books and the maps. But the lion's share is Mary's, but we tried to showcase something from the different collections, manuscripts and newspapers as well.
I asked you what you felt like most comfortable with and what you felt closest to on this exhibit, and you picked some of these display cases. And I wanted to show this particular gentleman because he later became governor of the state of Illinois, and we look at him here as a young soldier.
Correct.
And he doesn't look like he could be more than 21 years old. He's the one on our left in that
Absolutely.
picture of two there. Who is this fellow?
This is Joe Pfeiffer. They called him Private Joe. He and his brother served in the 33rd Illinois. After the war, he was awarded, much later, because they didn't award the Purple Heart during the Civil War, he was awarded the Purple Heart, which we have shown here. He was also a delegate for Harrison's campaign. And his daughter, Florence Pfeiffer Bohr, was the first woman Illinois state senator from Illinois.
Is that right?
In 1924.
Oh, darn.
Yes.
Now over here, this is interesting too. Now, Amza Fitch, he wasn't a native Illinoisan, but he ended up in Illinois, didn't he?
Correct.
And that's how you came by his belongings.
Yes, he married a woman from Oak Park, Illinois, up around Chicago.
This fellow right here.
Correct.
And he was on a gunboat, the Park, I guess, during the Civil War. Here's another picture of him right here. And from Oak Park, you were able to get letters and mementos and also objects from him. One of them, what are these funky glasses?
I love these glasses because I wear glasses. I guess that's why I'm interested in them. And when I first saw them, I thought they were sunglasses. So I did some research, and really during that time period they were invented. Actually, at the end of the 1700s, the blue tint was supposed to increase your visual acuity. It wasn't meant to be as sunglasses. And then the little flippers on the side were a form of bifocals.
Is that right?
But he wore these glasses on the Gunboat Park, which was in the Eastern Theater. We have a note that accompanied this artifact that said these were actually fished out of the Jamestown River. But we do know that he wore them on the Gunboat Park.
Wow. What are the odds of getting those back?
Exactly, out of a river.
Wow. Okay. Now, in this case is sort of the things that a soldier would use in his downtime. He'd either be mending his clothes or playing cards. But the one I like is this tiny little Bible here.
Yes.
And I think this belonged to Nathan Corbin. I'm not sure, but it wasn't unusual for them to have those keepsakes with them.
Absolutely, and you can see by the size of this, they could actually keep this with them. And it was very common in Victorian times to carry a piece of hair as a personal remembrance of their sweetheart or their wife at home. And so we have that actually came with the Bible as an artifact.
And you know what you've got here? It's dated 1862. This man carried this in his pocket with him all the time.
Absolutely.
Through every battle.
Absolutely.
Wow.
That's what kept him going.
Oh. Okay, let's start back over here. Now,
Okay.
You introduced me to a term I didn't know. And they look like dandies in this photograph.
Absolutely.
And you said, no, these are Zouaves.
Yes.
Zouaves was, I guess, a unit that dressed differently, but they were still Union regiments, right?
Absolutely. There were Zouave units in Illinois. This particular gentleman, John Black, formed a Zouave unit in Indiana. The sash you can see here was part of the uniform. This watercolor picture was taken from a lithograph, and it's John and his brother William.
John ended up being a general.
Yes, yes. And he was actually from Indiana, but moved to Danville, Illinois, when his father died. His mother remarried. She married a physician, and the physician actually went to the battlefield to tend to Black and his own sons during the war, which was very unusual.
And what's unusual about this, and you reminded me, coming across this many personal items is really a find, isn't it?
Yes.
It just doesn't happen.
The whole collection, and he survived and was very prominent, but we have 3 different varieties of epaulets that designate 3 different stations. We have his original kepi. It's called a kepi, the Civil War hat.
Wow.
And he was also awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor.
General John Black. Quite a guy.
Correct.
Okay, now, this is grim. There were more soldiers injured and died of injuries and wounds than died in battle. And this is one of the reasons why the crudeness of the surgical equipment they had there.
Absolutely. The surgical kit that's displayed here in the front was actually owned by a gentleman named Langdon, and it was a Confederate surgical kit. A lot of times these things were manufactured in the North or overseas, but the Confederates needed them as well. You can see some of the saws. This is a tourniquet here.
On the left. Oh my goodness, that is crude, isn't it? Tweezers, sewing equipment, a little scissors to snip tissue and thread with, and then a bone saw. My goodness.
And the disease that happened after they tried to do that's what killed them as well. This actually was donated by Herndon, very prominent in Springfield here.
Sure.
William Herndon being Lincoln's law partner.
Right. And a Dr. Herndon who was prominent here for years as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then there are also flags here. We've got a school going by here that's making a lot of noise. These flags, some of them were, well, we all know they were from the war. We don't know exactly where all of them were carried. But to start with this one right in the front here, this is interesting because this can show you what can happen to a flag in wartime.
And how important it was even to bring back a remnant of it. This flag was actually carried by the 22nd Illinois Infantry, but it was also carried through the war with Mexico before that.
Wow. It had seen a lot of action.
Absolutely.
And this one over here?
This flag was made by the women of Chester, Illinois, and it was presented to Captain McAtee of the 10th Illinois Infantry. and went through the war. This is a facsimile of the envelope. We love that it came in, and we had this stored with that.
That's the envelope. Okay, wow.
It was sent to the library as a donation, and so we thought that was pretty neat to put up a facsimile of the little note that came with it. Tells the history.
And right below it
Yes.
is another example, and this is now we don't know where this flag was exactly, but we do know that it was carried through the war.
Absolutely.
Because of the number of stars and the genuineness of the material. Okay, one other. Let's walk through this doorway here. And the only reason I want to show this is because this illustrates how important it was to carry the flag and to treat the flag with respect, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
This guy really went the extra mile. Who do we have here?
We had this gentleman is Henry Carrico. He was actually, again, born in Indiana, but he joined the cavalry in Illinois. The flag was so important as a symbol of your success on the battlefield. It was everything. And this, actually, he wrapped the flag around him and secreted it back. And there was a newspaper article about how he walked through the streets of Bloomington, Illinois with the flag wrapped around him. It's torn, stained, and has 2 6-pound cannon shots through it.
Well, Jane, as we look at Andersonville Prison Farm, more like a death camp, actually, down in Georgia, we have a story to tell about a couple of the individuals from Illinois who were incarcerated there. One of them is this Mr. Smith, W.R. Smith, 14th Illinois Infantry. Of course, things were so brutal and so deprived down there. He lost the use of his legs, but the story I want you to tell us is about another Illinois man there, and we're going to walk down here and see what he had gone through as a prisoner of war, and later as an older man in Illinois. John W. January. His story is really grim, isn't it?
Well, as the first gentleman we saw, Smith, they both suffered from scurvy. Most of the deaths during the Civil War were because of disease, due to disease, and these men were starved and also had very poor nutrition. This gentleman, January, joined the 14th Illinois in the cavalry, was taken prisoner the very next month in 1864. He had scurvy, and he was down to, when he left prison, he was down to 45 pounds. When he had infected feet, and the prison doctors at Andersonville refused to perform surgery. So he actually performed the surgery and amputated his own legs with a pocket knife. The photograph we have, and this is what I think is so fascinating, a lot of times people would write their own stories. So we replicated the back of this photograph. It goes with the picture. He survived, and as you can see, he also, the back of the card says that he raised a large family, and as of 1900 was still alive.
Lived a long life and raised a large family after that. Boy, what
Absolutely.
he's a tough guy, boy.
Absolutely.
Jane, Elmer Ellsworth was a friend of young Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And he has the distinction of having been, he's from Springfield, the first commissioned officer to die in the Civil War.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
What's the story?
Ellsworth studied the law with Lincoln in Springfield. He traveled with the Lincolns to Washington, D.C.
When he was inaugurated on that train trip. Okay.
On the train trip. He was a close personal friend of the Lincolns. Just a month or so later, he was in a boarding house, the Marshall House in Washington, D.C. He was trying to capture the Confederate flag and was shot and killed.
Wow. Okay, so and your exhibit here on him are letters and drawings that he himself made in his military career.
Correct. He actually lay in state in the White House in Washington, D.C. And this little letter here is from our manuscript collection. It's not such good handwriting, but he had written to his future father-in-law that he was apologizing for the handwriting because he thought he had contracted measles from the Lincoln boys.
Wow. Priceless.
And these original drawings of his, shown here, were actually used to publish a book on military uniforms and tactics by Ellsworth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Part 1 of Illinois Answers the Call, Boys in Blue, will be up until the end of the year. Part 2 opens early next year, and it's free. With another Illinois story in Springfield, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.